Vladimir Putin just told us exactly. He just told us exactly what he's going to do in Ukraine, and everything else that you're hearing in the mainstream media is a total distraction, or frankly, it's a lie. More on that in a second, but first some context and propaganda that they want you to pay attention to. So this is what the mainstream media is spinning. All you need to do is like go to CNN.com, or you need to go to any of these other websites, and this is what they want you to focus on. So we're going to go through a couple of major pieces. The Western media loves to ignore what's really happening in Ukraine. So it should come as no surprise to you that at the 6th month mark, can you believe we're at the 6th? That's hard to say, by the way. Try it at home. 6th month mark. Can you say it? Try it. Say it.
6th month mark.
Everyone's trying it right now who's watching.
6th month mark.
6th month mark. It's really, try to say it a couple times fast. It's very
It's
hard.
like almost like emergency authorization.
Yeah, 6th month mark. So we're at the 6th month mark right now of the war in Ukraine. Show it. So that's even harder to say. So it should come as no surprise. So that's even hard to say. That at this 6th month mark, they're spinning lies once again. There's a whole torrent of lies being pushed on your brains right now. Among the newest round of lies is a heaping batch of garbage that I want to break down for you. So number one, the biggest lie that they're telling right now is peace talks. I'm sure you've seen over the past few days, like, oh, there's peace talks. Yeah, there's peace talks. CNN.com had a front page story about peace talks, and we're
I don't
moving
think
towards
that
peace.
Graphic is appropriate for peace talks.
Not
what that
I
looks
added a
like.
mushroom cloud to show you that that's total garbage. There's no peace talks
I mean,
right now.
like
How can you have
literally
peace
what
talks when they're literally attacking a nuclear power plant?
I don't know.
Well, and after one of those mushroom clouds, how could you have anything other than peace after that? It would be completely quiet in that area.
It wouldn't be peace. It would be, I guess peace. You wouldn't hear crickets. You wouldn't hear anything. It would be total decimation. I just finished reading Unbroken by Laura Hillebrand, the story of Louis Zamperini, and just talking about the bombing in Nagasaki and Hiroshima, and as they're driving through and seeing the devastation. I mean, there's nothing left. And those are atomic bombs. Imagine nuclear explosions, right? So anyway, peace talks. We keep hearing about peace talks. You might have heard Western media talk about peace talks. Well, it's not happening. In fact, nothing came of the peace talks last week by Turkish President Erdogan and UN Secretary General Gutierrez. They flew to town to meet with Zelensky, and it was a big nothing burger. There was nothing. Nothing came of it. In fact, Erdogan today revealed that Zelensky's a little concerned about the people around him. Like that was the little tidbit that came out of that. No talk about peace. If there's any talk about peace, it was extracurricular, right? It was other people talking about it. No peace talks. Nothing's happening around peace talks. And reports are that the U.S. and NATO have been actively avoiding any direct talks with Russia over a peace settlement. In fact, take a look at how the Financial Times, you can take my laptop here, Philip, top Russian diplomat dismisses hopes of negotiated end to Ukraine war, saying basically, no, that the West isn't interested at all in meeting around peace. Zelensky has shot it down at, of course, the behest of Boris Johnson and the West.
And other Western influences.
Right, so there's no peace talks at all. There's no peace talks in any regard. Let me go back to my notes, Philip. Sorry.
Well, and as Noam Chomsky even said, like there's only a couple outcomes here, and peace is one of the main ones. It's either that or all-out war.
Right, or the total destruction of Ukraine. So the first thing you're talking about is peace talks. The second lie right now, the thing that you're going to see a lot more of, is these false flag operations. So false flag attacks. We've seen untold hundreds of false flag attacks already. False flag attacks date back to the 16th century. Here's an example of a false flag attack. Let me bomb my own building, and then I'll blame it on somebody else. Or let me sink my own battleship. Remember the Maine. So I can blame it on the enemy. What's that?
The Reichstag. When the Reichstag went up in flames, Hitler blamed Poland.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So blame it on somebody else, right? When you did it. And then, of course, it rallies everyone. The same thing as well. Last week, the latest false flag attack was last week at the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant. Russia has controlled since early March in the largest nuclear power plant in Europe. Ukraine has been carrying out attacks against the plant using American-built weapons, HIMARS. So Western media are laughably trying to plant a false flag, blaming it on Russia. That's exactly what's happening. The third is coup attempts. right? The third is coup attempts. The next load of garbage they're trying they're lying about are these coup attempts in Russia. This weekend, assassins killed the daughter of Putin's friend and guru, Alexender Dugin. So this is a big one.
Yes.
So if you want to kind of dial into what's happening with this, I mean, we were sort of sitting there on Saturday night when this started unfolding late on Saturday night after this event. That's Alexender Dugin there. He was giving a speech in Moscow at the Music and Literary Festival. So there he is. He was giving, we'll just play a little sound here and I'll talk over it. But he was giving a speech. His daughter was there. And here he is giving the speech. You can see him there at the little tent. So this is the last speech he gave. This was the event. His daughter was there. They were supposed to leave in the same car. And at the last second, he hopped into another car. It was his car that he gave to his daughter. Mm-hmm. She drove her father's car instead. Little did she know that it was wired with a homemade explosive device, a homemade bomb underneath the seat, underneath the driver's seat of the car. It exploded, killing his daughter, Darya Dugina. Think about this. You're there with your daughter. She's there to watch you. You're the keynote speaker. You're the honorary guest at this literary festival in Moscow. They at the last second switch up the cars. He doesn't go with her. She takes his car, his Land Cruiser. Little does she know that underneath that seat there's a bomb. So then
and there's also speculation that it was remotely detonated, meaning that the people that did it saw her enter the car and knew exactly, because they had to be in line of sight. That's at least some of the stories that I'm hearing, that it was remotely done. Which makes it even worse.
That's a piece of it I don't know yet, whether
right.
If it was
still
timed,
speculation.
If it was timed or remotely detonated. So we don't know yet if it was timed or remotely detonated. I guess we'll find that out. But he was right there. Like he was driving right nearby. So here's the video. Take a look. These are a few moments after him. You can see some of the video. Sorry, I should have clipped that. Here we go. So here is there he is. There's Alexander showing up at the scene to see the car on fire, and the wreckage with his hands on his head. And of course, you know, look at how the Times labels him ultra nationalist, right? So this idea that he's there watching it and he's seeing that his daughter is in that car, the car that he was supposed to have driven, right? Just awful. Alexander, gave speeches and lectures where he spoke out against Western NATO expansion over the years. He talked of building a stronger Russia that would serve as the opposite of NATO aggression. The West hated him. The West sanctioned his journalist daughter, Darya. And he was actually a marginal figure. Like he was friends with Putin, but he wasn't as popular as the West made him out to be.
Or yes, but posthumously for his daughter, as if like this is a main Putin ally and this was some sort of Western victory, is the way the headlines read. If you really are interpreting this sort of...
Well, even before that, I mean, they were calling him Putin's brain. The Putin's Rasputin, right? That he's the guy who planted all of these ideas about attacking Ukraine. He's the guy that planted all of these seeds, right? The West, the reason that they, sanction him, sanction his daughter, is because the West hates him. The West wants you to believe that this is a guy that we can rally around. Like he's the guy he's the evil, he's Putin's brain.
Yeah.
It reminds me of that Star Trek episode, Spock's Brain. There was an episode called Spock's Brain. I think his brain was like transplanted or something. And it's like this idea that Putin doesn't have a brain of his own and that this guy was driving everything.
Okay.
So in
he's the Dick Cheney of Russia is what they're sort of making him out to be.
But if you talk to, if you understand, like, no, he wasn't as big as everyone's making him out to be, but the West certainly elevated him to be this evil figure. The shitty New York Times this morning called him a Russian ultranationalist, and then they quoted him as calling for revenge against Ukraine, and for Russia to push on in its invasion. That's not what he said. In fact, if you listen to what he said, it's totally different. It was 100% made up by the New York Times. But of course, again, the New York Times does this on a regular basis, so they could Maybe they could actually hire some of those Twitter fact checkers or those Facebook fact checkers.
Oh, that's a good idea. Put them to work.
They're part of the deep state, the intelligence state. Like, hey, get some, because that's not what he said. That's not at all what he said. In fact, he was criticizing the Maidan uprising. He was criticizing what happened. We don't have to go into details about it, but it was a total lie. So even though that was likely carried out by Ukrainian nationalists with the help of U.S. intelligence assassins, the Western press didn't miss a beat, blaming Putin, of course, for killing his daughter. The Western press was amazing. So, and by the way, Vladimir Putin this afternoon came out and praised her and praised him. So anyway, forget that. But here's how the Western press immediately started playing this. Look, here's the Sun. Vlad the killer. Putin behind revenge bombing that wounded war guru and killed his daughter after former ally slammed him over Ukraine. Okay. And then they're saying this was the work of Russia.
That's a really hard sort of train of thought to follow, right? Like the way that they're trying to twist it is as if he's responsible. It's like that's a really big twist of a narrative.
But you can follow it right to coup attempts, right?
Sure.
So in the same breath, again, they're saying Putin's inner circle is tightening, and they're on high alert because now he doesn't know who to trust. And then if you add that to the other headline today about Putin, that he's on death's door, that he's not got long to live, he's not showing up at meetings anymore, even though he just gave a flag speech today, he looks totally fine. Never mind, but that's how the Western media portrays this crap. And like you literally watch your 6:30 news at night and Americans swallow this, or the West swallows this, the BBC and others, and they're like, oh, that's what's going on.
It's like the National Enquirer. It's like that thing you see in the grocery store. It's got like Putin looking all sad, and it's like saying these far-fetched stories.
Yeah, like he's dying, he's on death's door.
Yeah.
Okay.
People are saying he's been replaced by a body double.
Right. But of course, all this is laughable. The Ukrainian suspect who fled the scene and has already been identified by Russian security and is responsible in the bombing, they say. The assassin's name is Ukrainian citizen Natalia Vovich, a.k.a. Natalia Shaban. There she is. And according to reports, she conveniently arrived in Russia on July 23rd, together with her daughter, and rented an apartment building in the same building as Darya Dugina, next door, or like right around the same, on purpose to track her. She'd been using her teenage daughter as cover to move around Russia, and apparently she got into Russia using fake documents. On the day of the murder, Natalia Shaban magically attended the same event, the same music and literary festival, where Dugina was present and was there as an honorary guest. They knew she'd be there. They knew her father would be speaking as an honorary guest. She is now on the run as of this moment. She's on the run. She apparently fled to Estonia, according to reports. But Russia, just a few minutes before we went on, released this, which is security camera footage taken at the building where she lived. So you can go and play this. This is some security camera footage. I'll kind of narrate what we're seeing here. There she is going into her apartment during the day. Here she is going in at nighttime into the building. And she's in separate photos. She's seen wearing a Ukrainian military uniform. A relative of hers served in the Nazi Azov battalion in Ukraine. And the Mini Cooper that she is seen driving was, according to these reports, was also listed for sale a few months ago on a website. In order, like the speculation is that the same Mini Cooper was being used as cover. So here's the Mini Cooper, which she made her escape in. She's switched the license plates a number of times in order to hide. She had Donetsk plates. She had Kazakhstani plates. Anyway, so convenient, right? All of this is so convenient. Next, then the next lie that the Western media is telling us today is that we're in a stalemate right now in Ukraine. So we're in a stalemate, like a good, like over the top, like the Sylvester Stallone arm wrestling
An
movie.
impasse, if you will.
An impasse, right? So we're at a stalemate right now that Ukraine and Russia, they're just locking arms, like in arm wrestling. That Russia can't advance at all because Ukraine, helped by NATO forces, they're forced into a deadlock. And that's why we need to keep sending money. We need to keep sending weapons. We're now sending GPS-guided weapons. We're sending all sorts of we're sending anti-radar weapons. Additional round of money this weekend. We just approved millions more to send to Ukraine. Because
700 million to be exact.
700 million on top of the billions we just sent last week. We need that. They need that because we're in a deadlock. And I love how Bloomberg spins this. Here's Bloomberg today. Putin's war in Ukraine at a standstill, Western officials say. Western officials speaking on the condition of anonymity. Okay, sure. Well, despite all of the Western media propaganda, Russian President Putin told us exactly what he's planning to do and how this war ends. But of course, the West won't report it at all. The Russians' latest update is that they plan to liberate Donbass by the end of the year. Russia has told us this. Donbass, of course, is the area of eastern Ukraine. It's been under constant Ukrainian attack since 2014. A genocide has unfolded with tens of thousands of people killed there.
Yes.
Once that area is secure, then, and if Ukraine doesn't surrender, now this is the part that's speculation at this part. Putin has told us they will secure Donbass by the end of the year. That's what he has said. That's what Russia is saying. My speculative part is that if Ukraine doesn't surrender, then Russia pushes on and continues south into Odessa, right up to the Romanian border. So it pushes right past and right knocking on the door of Romania. There it settles to have that complete control of southern Ukraine. The Western media has also totally ignored the major Russian advancements. Again, going back to the stalemate argument and all of these victories recently. The capture of the city of Pesky was not reported in Western media circles at all. And all, by the way, and all of the war crimes that were discovered there as well, that were discovered there by Ukrainians in violation of international law. The Western press ignored this victory in Pesky, totally ignored it. As Gilbert Doctorow writes, he says, by taking these central regions' cities, they are cutting off the supply of weapons to the most heavily fortified Ukrainian positions just outside of Donetsk city, which have been bombarding residential districts and killing civilians daily for the past 8 years, he says. This explains their finally overrunning and destroying Ukrainian positions in the town of Pesky, just 2 kilometers from the DPR capital, this past week. So instead of covering these advancements of the Russian army and the destruction of the genocide that's been happening for 8 years, the Western media has been busy lying to you and all of us. Just listen to what they're telling you. Just listen, just flip on your news, flip on CNN, flip on any of these, flip on the BBC, flip on any of the Western media outlet stations. The Sun, I just showed you a bunch of headlines, Bloomberg, garbage, garbage, garbage. So you'll know like when this war is over, because when they get to Romania, when they get down to that border, they won't need a ceasefire. They won't need a settlement because at that point they're done. They're gone.
Will just be a new redistricting. It will be a new borderline.
Yeah.
And that's it, right? And nobody will be there to tell them any different.
No, and I spoke to Gonzalo Lira this weekend, and one of the things we were talking about is that there won't be a Ukraine. Like when this is done, there will not be a Ukraine in the way that we think of it. One thing Gonzalo said was, think of Ukraine like the size of Texas. It's a massive country. And of course, carving it up is going to be the goal. Once this is done, and if there is not a peace settlement, and if Zelensky doesn't come to the table, done. And then the other piece of this is that when Olaf Scholz of Germany, that this war is over. I think this is a great point that I think Gilbert Doctorow said, that once they flip on that Nord Stream 2 pipeline, and Germany says, okay, let's flip on that Nord Stream 2 pipeline, it's over. When Germany's like, here we go, let the oil flow. And
then Europe will be like, okay, we talked a tough game for a while, but we will take this fossil fuel, sure.
Yeah, we're done now. We're done now.
Which is interesting, right?
Because otherwise they're going to have...
Go ahead, David.
Sorry about that. I was just going to say, otherwise they're going to have an uprising on their hand because people are, they're telling them to, use washcloths instead of taking showers. Like, people aren't going to stand for that kind of thing for a long time.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. And, the idea of there not being a Ukraine left. Like, it doesn't have to be this way at this point. People can stop dying. Politicians can lay down their swords and say, we don't like it. This is not the way we wanted it to be. But if people live, then we can live with these borders in this way, right? But there's so many egos at play here that the West has to tell themselves that they can successfully push back Russia in order to stop Russian expansion. Russia has to tell itself that it can stop NATO expansion. And so people will keep dying, people who really don't have any sense in dying for these reasons.
Scott George in our chat says that Germany will capitulate. They have no choice. Yeah, good point, Scott, because when you're asking people literally to
turn off the lights by 8, set the
not take a
thermostat
shower.
to 17 in the maximum 17 in the winter, right? All kinds of things like this. Yeah, don't drive on certain days. Mandate kids take the bus or whatever. There's just been a laundry list of things. Like, most of these are sacrifices that maybe we would want to voluntarily make, but when the government is saying, oh, you should be making these sacrifices so that we can, win a war, whether you agree with the war or not, that ideologically just doesn't sit right.
Right. And, I spoke to Ralph Schulhammer in an interview that I did here on the channel. I encourage all of you to go and watch it. We release our redacted conversations usually on the weekend. So I sat down with academic and journalist Ralph Schulhammer to talk about Germany and Europe's energy crisis and how it's a completely man-made energy crisis. And again, Western sanctions have completely collapsed. They've completely ruined the Western world. And Russia you've solidified Russia. Mm-hmm. You've literally created a new world order in this. Maybe you didn't think you were going to do it, but you have done it.
Yeah.
Really, really troubling.
The personal empowerment saying is what you resist persists. Right. That's what it feels like at this point. Do we have to all get on board with resisting this, with fighting against something at this point that is costing lives? We are not, pro-Russia. We're not pro-NATO. We're not pro anything other than peace and people living at this point. People not dying for man-made wars that are started by politicians. And at this point, we don't want to be told lies about Ukraine winning a war that they're losing that's costing people's lives.
So Vladimir Putin has told us exactly what he's going to do, what they plan to do. Let's see if you see any Western media coverage of that.